Oh my god, that was embarrassingly bad. Please never let them cook again. I just got out of watching Joker Folie. It doesn't matter how it's pronounced, but Joker 2 Second Joker is here, and it is pointless. Please save yourself the time and wait until this movie is on streaming or don't watch it at all. It is a terribly boring film that doesn't have anything important to say and only exists for the sake of making money. I honestly don't know who this movie is for. People who loved the first one will hate this because it's basically about how wrong they were. There is literally an entire sequence where they make it clear as day and the Joker says to camera, "We're not giving the people what they want." On the other hand though, anyone who hated the predecessor will also not like this one because it's just not that interesting and has nothing to say whatsoever. I cannot stress that point enough. It's a movie that refuses to commit to any of its many premises and is more so just a series of events that happen in order with no real stakes or drama. Joker Folie nailed it is a musical so aimless, frustrating, and downright insulting that should not exist. But here's the thing. It's not all bad. As dramatic as I was in the intro, this movie is not without its merits. Before we dive into the world of negativity breaking down this mediocre and boring film, I do have one nice thing to say about it. The movie is gorgeous. It is some of the best color grading in not just any comic book movie, but really any movie I've seen in general. It is so pretty and colorful to look at, which is not at all what I'd expect from a Joker film, especially with how washed out the previous one was at times. The direction really steps up here, as Todd Phillips genuinely surprised me a lot. While I have many problems with his story treatment, I owe him an apology for his directing skills because the movie looks so good. Aesthetically, this film is full of some of those dazzling visuals put to screen in the last few years. And also, the set design is phenomenal. This movie takes place in 1983, and you can tell. For some reason, this movie has a $200 million budget, which I'm convinced is money laundering a little bit, but you can see they put that money to good use because they actually recreated this New York aesthetic, and for the more elaborate musical numbers in the film, they actually put a lot of effort into the set design to create these beautiful sound stages that really resemble the musical tone and vibe they're going for. It's very impressive stuff, and I give the film total credit for doing a great job at making this look as good as possible. It feels real, authentic, and genuine. But that being said, it really falls apart in pretty much every other aspect to me. Let me just give you some context before we get started about my headspace going into this film. I did not enjoy the 2019 Joker movie. I think it is one of the most overrated films of all time. I do not understand the hype for it. I feel like it is such a disappointment and a movie that is acting so pretentious and self-important when in reality it is just so mid. It's a comic book movie in name only. They really stay as far away as possible from embracing this fantastical nature of the world of DC in every single way. If you stripped away the clown makeup and the Joker name, I would have no clue they're trying to adapt the Joker. They never show any interest in doing this character justice, and they're just kind of slapping it onto this story that's basically just ripping off the King of Comedy and Taxi Driver, but worse. They take this mysterious criminal mastermind and try and turn him into this sympathetic incel cult leader, and it does not work at all for me. He accidentally lucks into every single thing he achieves in that movie. But worst of all, it pretends to be this incredibly deep film holding a mirror to society, but it doesn't say anything worthwhile. Just vague and surface level society bad stuff without actually trying to do something bold. And the ideas in that film are screamed in your face so hard that you couldn't miss them if you were blind and deaf. But regardless of all that, at least that movie is still engaging to watch due to Joaquin's performance and how well paced it is. I have many problems with the narrative and how on the nose the movie is, but it's at least trying to do something. All that being said though, I was genuinely excited going into this movie. As someone who didn't enjoy the first one, they seem to be doing something different here, adding in that musical element. I get it's not for everybody, but I personally really enjoy musicals, and I think that doing something so bold and ambitious as turning this serious and grounded Joker movie into this over-the-top flamboyant musical, that was fascinating to me. It felt like they really had a creative idea and were trying to do something that no other comic book movie has done before. On top of that, I'm a huge Harley Quinn fan. I've not made that a secret on this channel, and I was really interested to see how they'd adapt her. I can't tell you enough just how much that first trailer turned me around on the movie. Seeing this Joker movie look that good from just the trailer alone, including these really surprising elements, and seem to be fully embracing it, had me really excited. And here I am, now having seen Joker 2, I'm just gonna keep calling it that from now on, I can't get the pronunciation every time, and I could not be more disappointed and frustrated with how bad this movie was. I gave them a chance. I went into this with an open mind, expecting to see something that was made just for me, it seemed. But after sitting through those 2 hours and 18 minutes that dragged a lot, I honestly don't understand what the point of that movie was. I could not tell you for the life of me, why was it made? What are the themes of that film? And I've come to the conclusion that there's straight up no message in that movie. There's no big takeaway that I'm supposed to be coming out of that with. It's not like the first one where you can at least understand this advocacy for for mental health. Here, I have genuinely no idea what this movie is trying to say. If you do know, please let me know in the comments. The closest they get is attempting to say that you shouldn't idolize the fantasy of someone, but before you can even get to that conclusion, the movie takes a sharp left turn into a horrible ending that we're going to get to later. This review will be spoiler free. I will let you know when the spoilers are coming towards the end of the video, but like, the ending blew me away with just how bad it is. It is horrible how it just stomps over the rest of the movie and cuts every single plotline dead in its tracks to make it so there's no satisfying payoff. I do think there's an interesting idea in this movie. The concept of dealing with fantasy versus real life and this parasocial relationship you develop with people is a really interesting concept to view through the lens of the Joker and Harley Quinn. It's a new spin on their relationship that I really like, especially because in this movie it kind of puts Harley Quinn as the one in power, and I think that is a really great twist on their dynamic, but unfortunately it is completely undercooked and unsatisfying. A report came out about a month ago saying that this movie was rewritten on the fly, where the actors would come in on the day and scenes of the movie would be rewritten on napkins from the night before. And trust me, you can tell. This movie does not go anywhere with any stories in any interesting way. It just meanders and refuses to commit to what they're doing in a way that is so frustrating to watch because there is such a good idea buried deep within that film, and instead we're just given a movie that doesn't know what it wants to be. I really appreciate how they're trying to do something different from that first movie in almost every single way, like how little violence there is in the film as they try and make up for that with elaborate musical numbers and character work, but at no point does the sequel present a compelling argument for why it should exist in the first place. I know that's a crazy thing to say because art doesn't need a reason to exist, but like, you told a complete story in that first movie. It's already a crazy pitch to try and do it again and bring this character back, and the movie at no point makes me realize why they made it. It just seems like they're trying to milk that cash cow and keep the story going, and they can't decide on what they want to do with it, so it just kind of runs in place for 2 hours before a stupid ending that ruins it all. It is so mind-boggling to me that this got through so many different stages of development and nobody even stopped to think, hey, maybe we need to work on this a little more and let the script cook. Okay, let's dive more into specifics now and talk about the most controversial part of the film, the musical elements. I'll never forget the first day it was reported that Joker 2 would be a musical and seeing how divisive that was, because a lot of people were immediately turned off by that idea, but again, it really excited me. I love musicals, and I was praying that that element would be what carried this film for me, but unfortunately those musical elements just do not land at all. It has nothing to do with the set design or the amount of effort they put into making it look as spectacular as possible. It is a visual feast for the eyes the entire time. It's all about the actual placement and utilization of them in the movie, along with the fact that none of the songs are really memorable for me outside of one, but that's only because of how repetitive it was. With a good musical, you come out of it and there's at least one banger song you can think of. In some of my other favorite musicals, like La La Land, it's basically the entire soundtrack because that movie is a masterpiece. Or a recent one I love was Tick Tick Boom starring Andrew Garfield, which had 3090, a song that is on my actual playlist. But in here, there's nothing that really stood out to me musically. It all just came and went with nothing that I could really rock out to. I feel like it was just music for the sake of having music. And the thing about the way they're used in this movie is that they really interrupt the flow of the pacing and they feel tacked on to me. It's more so a gimmick than an actual narrative choice. They'll be dealing with the standard courtroom drama in the movie, and then all of a sudden it would cut to a musical instead of Arthur's mind, and they would just go back to what they're regularly doing. It brings the flow of the story to a grinding halt to do this dance number that isn't very exciting because it also feels like the movie doesn't want to commit to being a musical. I think that you could have used this in a really interesting way to show his insanity and how he uses that to connect with Harley. The way these two characters meet is through a musical lens, so obviously he's going to look at her through that connection, and I think that if you have him use this musical world inside of his imagination to connect with Harley and have this shared madness, which is what the title translates to, shared madness, but they never really have that in a sense. And I think that you could have had it be where they're both in this fantasy world together, and when Joker is with Harley, his life is this beautiful musical, and otherwise it's this dreary and depressing existence that he hates. And I think that contradiction could have been a great way to introduce the musical naturally and actually have it serve a narrative purpose to show just why they exist in the first place. It's this escapism for him, as being the Joker and with Harley is the light of his life. And they kind of do that to an extent because most of the musical sequences are inside of his head except for one or two, but they never go all out with it. It just kind of exists for the sake of it. And it doesn't help that Joaquin Phoenix is unfortunately not a great singer. He's trying his absolute best, but oh god, some of that stuff was rough. He doesn't have the voice for it, and I feel like it's intentional. I get that the Joker wouldn't be a good singer. He's the Joker. But I feel like, again, you could have used that in a narrative way. In the real world, when when he's singing. He doesn't have a great voice, and that's what everybody else hears. But in his fantasy world, you can swap his voice out with someone else and have him lip sync it to where he has this incredible singing voice, because that's how it would work in a fantasy world. But it's just kind of Joaquin giving it his all, and I respect the hell out of him for committing to it like this. But it's hard, especially when you're working with Lady Gaga, one of the best vocalists of the last decade, who does a phenomenal job, by the way. Every time she's singing, I'm almost convinced this is a good movie. Almost. But the thing is, they also don't really let her sing properly until like 2 numbers where she's actually using the Lady Gaga voice. Otherwise, it's kind of like that spoken word soundtrack you get in a lot of musicals, to where you can see they're trying to lean into it a little bit, but they don't want to fully embrace the idea of this being a musical. And I think that having her use that singing voice a lot more often would have gone a long way, but it just doesn't really land at all, which sucks, because I think the musical element was what this entire movie hinged on, and when that doesn't deliver, you're gonna have a lot of problems for the rest of the film. This is a movie that is too afraid to commit to anything remotely interesting, so nothing interesting happens in it at all. You can tell that just about everybody responsible for the creation of the film is ashamed to be in a comic book movie, and that is another big problem I have with the film. You have to fully commit. I need to stop saying commit. Hold on, let me look at this up on a thesaurus. You need to fully invest yourself in what you're doing, otherwise, if you're not giving it your all, it's not gonna work. The fact that this film wants to carry the Joker branding, but doesn't want to deal with any of the actual Joker elements, just screams to me that they only care about using the IP to bring in money. All the problems I have with the first film not embracing the comics is amplified here. It is so much worse in this movie. They don't even want the Joker to be the Joker. They are doubling down on the fact where even he hates being the Joker. And it's such a wild thing to see this character, who is supposed to be this brilliant, sadistic clown in the comics, always obsessed with trying to break Batman, acting as this guy who's this really sad, pathetic old man, and it just does not work for me at all. An interview a few weeks back showed Todd Phillips saying he will never be the Clown Prince of Crime. It tells me that they have no interest in doing this character right, so why should I care about a movie like that? It's such an important part of the identity, and you're just not letting him ever achieve that? You're just trying to engage with these deep, edgy topics, but you're never willing to invest more into what it actually means to use those topics. I just cannot fathom the fact that they wanted to make a Joker movie. First of all, that in general is insane, considering the whole reason he's interesting is that we don't know his origin. And you're trying to build him up as this character who does not resemble the Joker in the slightest, and then you make the second movie all about the first movie and the consequences of that, and I will never understand why they are so ashamed of adapting probably the most popular DC villain of all time. They don't want to do him the way he should be, and they're obsessed with this alternate version of him that is just Taxi Driver. Or take a look at Harley Quinn in this film. They don't even call her Harley Quinn. They just call her Lee. I'm so frustrated nowadays with superhero movies being annoyed that they're superhero movies. If you're gonna make a movie where this stupid clown grows to power and I'm supposed to believe the entire city believes in him overnight like that because he killed a few people, but you won't let someone be called Harley? It doesn't make any sense. Like, come on. Know what genre you're working in, and just let someone be called Harley. They don't even call her Harleen Quinzel in the film. They call her Harley Quinzel. It just screams to me that they think this stuff is too goofy. And if you don't appreciate the material you're working with, you don't deserve to be working with these characters in the first place. And if you thought the first Joker movie was hardly taking place in the DC universe, this movie is even worse, because outside of one new character, all the Gotham set dressing is just that. They take names of locations and places, and they say it, but they don't actually introduce them as they should. Arkham isn't this corrupt, gothic, rundown asylum on the edge of Gotham, where you send only the worst to the worst. It's basically just Alcatraz Island. Gotham City just looks like New York in 1983. They don't want to introduce anything that actually identifies this as Gotham, because God forbid if someone sees anything gothic in the city of Gotham. This is my biggest pet peeve with superhero movies. I hate when they don't actually want to admit what they're representing. And at every point, the creative team behind the movie lets you know that they're ashamed of what they're working on. The whole press tour was the people involved letting people know that, oh, this isn't a musical. It very much so is a musical. There's like a song at least every 10 minutes. This film is littered with musicals that interrupt the flow of the movie, and they have the audacity to say it isn't a musical, insulting our intelligence, trying to lure people in. Embrace what you are. Be proud that you're a comic book movie musical. They've never done that before. You could be the first. You can capture new markets and new people who wouldn't otherwise be seeing these movies, but instead, you're just so embarrassed to be what you are. I'm having a generational crash out right now over this movie that I'm never gonna think of again after tonight. But man, I'm so glad that they're probably never gonna make another movie after this, because nobody who was responsible for the creative decisions in this film should be allowed near any superhero movie characters again. They do them all a disservice because they don't care about what they're doing. doing. You can make changes all you want. I support changing the source material to fit your adaptation, but they have to keep the core of the story alive. You have to make a Joker who actually represents the Joker in more than just name only, and they don't do that. They've created an entirely original character and just called him the Joker. It's just plain stupid. Okay, I'm being way too negative for how I like to be on this channel, so let me say something nice again. Joaquin Phoenix is still really good as the Joker. I may not like the interpretation of the character, but I cannot deny that his performance is electric. I don't think it's as good as it is in the first movie, though. There were a lot of times in this film where, because of the way Arthur is mentally, he was mumbling a lot, saying these kind of pivotal lines, and I just could not make out what he was saying. It was really hard for me to understand, and because of that, I was just trying to figure it out in my head, and I just kind of got distracted, and I missed out on stuff. And I feel like that happens a frequent amount of the time. It's just a small thing, because otherwise he's doing a pretty good job with the actual performance, even if the script he has to work with is worse. He does not get a lot to do in this movie, admittedly. I feel like a lot of the time the Joker character in the film is more tranquil, and you don't get to see that more... I was about to say erotic. The word is not erotic. Trust me. I do not want to see an erotic Joker. The word is erratic. In the first movie, he's very erratic and unpredictable. Whereas here, the Joker is very much having this inner turmoil. And I think Joaquin does a good job of portraying that struggle he's having with himself. But I just think that it doesn't compare to that first movie where you can see this more eccentric performance he's giving, even if the character doesn't really change throughout the movie. Mentally, he ends the film in the exact same part as where he started. I'll touch on that later into spoilers, but Joker's character arc doesn't give him any growth. He doesn't really learn anything outside of him becoming more sad by the end of the movie. Growth happens, but it's all off screen. The previous film ends with him as this icon, dancing on top of a cop car in the most unsubtle way possible, as he's given praise from legions of new Joker fans. And then he's arrested and brought into this white cell in Arkham, and he seems proud of his actions. But the thing is, by the time we pick up with him here, you can see kind of some remorse developing in him. And he's gone to this catatonic state where he's not really talking to people, he's not like his old self, and I feel like not showing us that development, picking up with him here, and then having him relearn the same lesson throughout the movie that he did off screen is just a big problem for me. We don't get to see the growth that I would have liked to with this character. Despite all those issues though, he is still a much better Joker than Leto. I don't think that's ever gonna change. As for the co-lead of the movie, Lady Gaga playing Harley Quinn, she was just fine. What we got of her, I enjoyed. She's not in the movie nearly enough as she should have been. You can see scenes from the trailer that were just completely cut out at the final product, and I think it hurts the film a lot because she is in a way the single driving force of the entire narrative. She is the heart of this movie, and she's in it for a shockingly short amount of time. Harley is the most interesting part of this movie. I really like this new interpretation of the character and the ideas they were presenting. They were just executed in a terrible way because of the lack of screen time she gets. As for Gaga's performance, it's much more subdued than you're used to for Harley. She doesn't have that bombastic Brooklyn accent, or she's not this over-the-top character who doesn't take things seriously. This is a version of Harley Quinn who is very much so still in that transitional phase, as she's moving away from Harleen and becoming Harley. But the thing is, the movie doesn't really give her that arc enough. By the end of the film, her arc just kind of happens and ends. There are good ideas with this character, they're just not executed well at all. Because I really like the idea of this fascinated fraud who loves the idea of the Joker and has fallen in love with who she saw on TV, and then she meets the real person and has to come to this realization that he may not be who she thinks he is, but she wants to bring that side out of him. The issue is, though, that Harley Quinn exists more in fantasy than as an actual character in the film, which I get is kind of the point because it's how Arthur perceives her, as his dream girl who supports him and lets him be his true self, but it doesn't take away from the fact that we're mostly seeing her as the fantasy. We're not getting enough time to understand what makes Lee tick. She's kind of wasted in this movie because Gaga is giving it her all and trying to do her best, especially with the musical numbers, but the film doesn't really have an interest in highlighting the exciting parts of her character, and it really suffers because of that. We never get to dive into their bad romance, enough for my taste. Yeah, you get it, because she made the song. Okay, I'm sorry. It was low-hanging fruit. I had to do it. I just wish that we had more time to appreciate her, because while Joker is off doing his boring plotline, there's something there with her, and the movie does not devote enough time with it to make it actually interesting. Harvey Dent is also in this movie, but he's barely a character. He's the closest thing the movie has to an antagonist, as he's making a case for the Joker to get the death penalty. But the thing is, he gets no personality, no characterization, no screen time outside of him spewing legal jargon. If there wasn't a nameplate at the beginning beginning of the movie that said Harvey Dent, I'd have no clue it would be Harvey Dent. And my friend who I saw it with, he had no clue either. He tells me after the movie, I didn't know that was Harvey Dent until a character said his name in the movie. They do a horrible job at giving this version of Harvey any sense of character. Whether that be this version of him who is clearly struggling with inner demons, or someone who's trying so hard to do the right thing. No, he's just generic district attorney. The last time we saw Two-Face in live action, he was masterfully played by Aaron Eckhart in The Dark Knight. The bar was raised as high as possible, so if you're going to introduce Harvey again, you have to make it count. And seeing that challenge, they decided to not even attempt anything and just put him in the movie as some twink. I would have loved to see him do anything, but he only exists within the confines of a courtroom, and you never get to learn anything about him at all. It is such a waste of the character. Outside of those three, there's not really any other characters in the movie worth talking about. I guess quick shout out to Brendan Gleeson. He was a big surprise for me for how much I enjoyed him as this corrupt prison guard. He brings a lot of life into an otherwise dull movie. Besides that, those are the only 4 characters in the film who actually get something to do. And I use that in the loosest way possible, because again, some of these characters do not get much to do at all. They all get completely underutilized and mishandled to the point where it doesn't even make sense why they were making this movie in the first place. They are stretching what little story they have over the course of 2 hours and 18 minutes, and they still can't find a way to make these characters interesting. The single worst thing about this movie, though, is that it is so painfully boring. If it was just a film that took a lot of big swings that didn't land with me, that would be fine. I could at least respect the movie for what it is. But no, it takes those big swings and then addresses them in the most dull, unexciting way possible. It starts out pretty strong, honestly. There's this really fun opening that they do, and then it transitions into the actual start of the movie, and I was enjoying myself for probably the first 15 minutes. But the more it goes on, the more it takes its time in the mundanity of it all. You see his day-to-day life as they slowly reintroduce you to the Joker, and then he slowly does all these interviews, and then he slowly does the most boring court case I've ever seen. The vast majority of this movie centers around that court case as Harvey is trying to give the Joker the death penalty. I cannot tell you enough how boring and uninteresting those scenes were to me. There isn't a second where you feel the stakes or any sense of tension. A good courtroom drama should be exciting and filled with some really big twists and revelations as the characters are observed on a psychological level. It shouldn't just be characters saying legal buzzwords or trying to make the Joker sound crazy. I want them to have these big reveals as they dive into what happened in the previous movie and break this down in ways that could actually end with some huge consequences. Here, it plays out like an actual real court case, as it's filled with boring, dull legal dialogue. And every single time they cut back to it, it's about the same mental illness play that never results in anything. It feels like they had this idea for putting the Joker on trial for the crimes they saw him commit on TV, and they didn't want to do the work to make this case fit within the flow of the movie. It's drawn out over a long runtime that it does not need, and they're clearly spinning their wheels up until a big moment at the end. And because of that, there's no satisfying payoff to the courtroom drama. It feels like such a monumental waste of time by the end of it. I'm not someone who falls asleep during movies. I didn't do it during this one, don't worry. But I was struggling to keep my eyes open at some points, and I watched this at 3 o'clock p.m. I was wide awake going to that theater, anticipating a film I thought would be good, and instead I was met with some of the worst legal drama I've seen in any movie or show. They should not be that hard to do, but they don't even try and throw anything out there that would even remotely excite the audience. If I didn't feel like I was wasting my time and money, I'd almost be impressed with how boring it really is. At least with the first film, my problems with it all come from the narrative. The biggest problem with this one is just how lifeless it is. It really shocked me just how slow this movie went. It has this snail's pace as they really take their time going through each little moment. And with the musical elements thrown in there, it makes it take even longer as the whole narrative grinds to a halt. I can't find myself enjoying anything because what's on screen is presented in the least imaginative way possible. It's like they had ideas that were good on paper, but didn't want to put any effort into making them actually engaging for the audience. Alright, you know what? I think it's time. We are about to enter the spoiler section of the video. I'm going to talk spoilers now. I cannot wait any longer. If you have not watched the movie yet, do not continue on from here, unless you want to know the spoilers. But also, don't go watch the movie. It's bad, nonsensical, and boring. They don't make it worth your time, and everyone involved in the creative process is so obviously embarrassed to be making the film. I don't know if I've walked out of a superhero movie more disappointed than this, and that says a lot. Alright, final warning before we continue. Here we go. Let's talk about how this movie ends. The final moments of this film are insultingly bad. It is probably my new least favorite ending in any superhero movie ever. If you haven't watched the movie, basically here's what happens. After escaping, the Joker is sent back to prison and he receives a call that he has a visitor. On his way to finding out who this visitor is, he's stopped by this unnamed inmate that we saw briefly in the background of the movie prior to this. He wants to tell Arthur a joke, and the punchline into this joke is that he stabs Arthur to death and kills him in prison. And if that wasn't bad enough, he starts laughing maniacally and carves a smile into his face, clearly insinuating that he's the real Joker now. It is such a insane and crazy ending to throw in there that is done purely for shock value and adds nothing to the story. They do this for the sake of subverting expectations. Oh, they'd never see this coming. Here's the guy that's actually the Joker. He was inspired by the Joker and now he's gonna do what Arthur never could. It's stupid. I could not believe my eyes watching it in that theater. It completely undercuts this entire movie and the film that came before it. They couldn't even commit to Arthur being the Joker. That's how bad this movie is at committing to any single premise. It is so unsatisfying, as every single arc in the movie remains unresolved or undercooked because of this moment. I mentioned earlier how Arthur starts and ends the movie in the exact same spot mentally, obviously before he's stabbed to death. His whole arc in this film is just realizing that he was right. He starts the movie feeling remorseful about his actions as Joker, and it's only once Harley kind of gives him this motivation to be the Joker that he wants to be Joker again, and then he realizes how bad it is in court when he's being someone he's not, and then he just renounces being the Joker on live TV and pisses off this guy, so he just kills him. It's insane! The Harley story, by the way, just ends. Harley just breaks up with him because he wasn't the idea, and she just goes home. But again, they couldn't even commit to that because they have the hanging thread of who was visiting him in prison, obviously trying to insinuate that it was Harley, but we're never going to find out now because the Joker died. He just dies in prison. I'm still shocked. I'm sat here right now, and I cannot believe that they thought that would be a good ending to this movie. After you waste our time for 2 hours, you end the film with the Joker's death. And I think that it could have worked. You could have easily killed the Joker in this powerful way where he becomes more of a symbol. And in his death, he becomes the very thing he resented at the end of his life. I think it would have been a powerful and tragic end for this character I don't like. But no, he just dies in prison. And I guess I'm glad I never have to see this version of the Joker again. But like, come on, man. You can't think of anything creative? You just have him killed? I feel like it's some sick joke that they're playing on me. Also, the payoff to the trial is terrible, because Arthur is revealed to be guilty on all these counts of murder, which obviously we're gonna see coming. He shot a man on national TV. Oh, hold on, a quick tangent. I hate how they're trying to do the evil alter thing in this movie, where the main argument in the court case is that Arthur's lawyer is trying to say that he suffers from dissociative identity disorder and he has an evil personality that killed all those people, which is such a tired and outdated and toxic trope that I am sick of. I am a Moon Knight fan. I know a lot about dissociative identity disorder. It's a really serious disorder that needs to be handled correctly because there's been such a dangerous stigma around it over the last decade in movies. It is dangerous in media to keep presenting people with DID as people with these evil parts of them tucked away. To even suggest that the Joker has DID just was really disgusting to me. I'm so sick of that trope. I need it to be gone forever. And there isn't even any payoff that makes it worthwhile, because as I was trying to say before I went on this tangent, the court, as they're reading out the verdict, just gets bombed out of nowhere, and we never find out who did it. It makes the entire court scene that they wasted so much time on because it was so boring feel so pointless. The bomb just happens out of nowhere, and despite taking the brunt of the blast, Arthur is the only person who survives it, and then he just leaves and escapes for a bit. It feels to me like they couldn't think of a way to end the court scene in an exciting way, so they just have someone try and kill the Joker because he wanted to renounce being the Joker. We're a fan of the Joker and they didn't want to see him guilty, so they bombed the courthouse. We'll never know because it just gets unresolved. Something that this movie does a lot, where they introduce these concepts that are there to strike conversation but serve no narrative purpose in the plot, because they want you to have all these unanswered questions and dangling plot threads because they think it's a substitute for story. Like, seriously, genuine question, what the hell happened in Solitary with that horribly uncomfortable sex scene? First of all, never show me horny Joker again. That is going to haunt me for nightmares. I don't like knowing the fact that Joker has weak game and only lasts for a minute. That is just something I'm gonna see in my sleep. I do not like knowing that the Joker f***s and that he's bad at it. But more importantly, is it supposed to be real or fake? I thought it was such an obviously fake moment because the Joker was thrown in solitary confinement. How did Harley break in to see him? And it comes after this hallucination dream sequence, so I thought it was obviously fake. But the end of the movie makes it seem real. They painted the idea of she was actually there, and if so, how did she get in there? I'm going insane thinking about this movie that I know is not good. I feel like these things were done to confuse us on purpose. It wasn't for the sake of the narrative. They just do it so they make the Joker seem crazy, and they give you something to talk about after the fact. And you know what? It's working. It's getting me talking in a bad way, though. Look at how the first movie handles the Joker's relationship with his neighbor Sophie. He thinks he's dating her in his head, but then there's the incredibly too on-the-nose reveal that the Joker actually imagined their whole dating life. And at least there, they give you a conclusion to this. It feels like in this movie, they're trying to recapture that magic by throwing in so many elements that are confusing and don't make sense in the plot to make you think that the Joker is crazy. But instead, it just comes off as nonsensical because you can't make sense of what is real and what is fake in this movie. It doesn't make for a more immersive viewing experience. It makes for a more frustrating watch. I cannot get invested in a movie that doesn't even know what it's trying to do. The movie is dealing with this idea that the Joker is not someone who should be worshipped. The first film sets up this idea that the Joker is this cult-like hero, and it created this very toxic fan base of people who actually started to idolize the Joker. And so they do something that is admittedly an interesting idea. This film is a commentary on that first movie, and how director Todd Phillips basically admits that he regrets making that film. But the thing is, in execution, it's done in the messiest way possible. They take this meta storytelling, and they dilute it with courtroom drama that don't captivate you in the slightest, and undercooked Joker and Harley romance. It just falls flat in every conceivable way. I really think you could have made something special here. Even with the commentary of having the Joker and Harley relationship be this idea, and how it's not smart to fall in love with a concept and this fantastical version of someone inside your head, it's completely underwhelming because they're not given enough development. The fact that both Joker and Harley have an idealized version of each other in their own heads, and we never really see those consequences outside of a breakup scene that's hastily thrown in at the end, is mind-boggling. The way that Harley loves only the Joker and not Arthur, while Arthur just loves Lee, and you have both of those ideologies competing with each other as they're trying to bring different parts out of the other, sounds like something that works really well on paper, but the movie doesn't dedicate any time to exploring the relationship. They don't try and make it land with you at all. They just move on as quick as they can to the next thing that also gets underdeveloped. Also, let me just get ahead of this because I know there's someone out there writing a comment about how I just don't understand the movie and it's actually a misunderstood masterpiece. No, I get it. Don't worry. The actual story of the movie is not lost on me. Hidden deep in this movie is the underdeveloped idea that people will choose spectacle over actually caring about someone's mental health. And I think that is a fantastic pitch for a movie. It's just a shame here that Joker 2 decides to completely fumble that idea and do it in the most poor execution possible. There's 100% a way you could have told this story, just don't do it in a way that is so boring and mind-numbing that I would rather be watching paint dry. I'm not proving the movie's messaging right by not liking it. I'm just going out of my way to say that this is not a well-written story, and they should have done a better job in making it more engaging as a viewer. It is such a good idea, and I hope that someday somebody does that kind of story right, because it is being wasted in this movie by people who did not take the time to properly develop it and make it as interesting as it should be. This is not a movie that I just completely missed the point on. I get what they're trying to do here. It's just bad. And because of that, the movie feels so pointless because there's no message you take away from it. Anything they try and do is severely underdeveloped, so when you leave the film, it just feels so aimless. You can see inklings of ideas in there, but they're not expanded upon enough to actually impact the story's plot in the way they should be. It just makes the movie feel so ineffective and meaningless. I really respect that this movie tried to do something ambitious and bold. They could have easily rehashed the first movie and continued down that path with more of this cult leader-esque Joker, but wanted to bring in Harley to do something new. They could have easily just done a classic Joker and Harley crime story, but they wanted to challenge themselves and the audience with a movie that critiques the first film. Unfortunately though, they weren't able to do either of those things in a way that was interesting or entertaining. It results in a movie that smothers any inspiration in a dull courtroom drama that continues to poorly adapt its two lead characters. Their attempt to end things with a shocking bang results in a frustrating whimper that renders everything that came before pointless. I wish I could say I left the theater feeling angry or upset, but I just felt nothing. You can see glimmers of potential hidden in this movie, but they're all drowned out by the fact that the film doesn't give you any reason to care. There was no justification for the sequel to be made in the first place, and you can tell since there isn't anything to take away from it. The only thing I can say about Joker 2 is that it happened and I really wish it didn't. Okay, you know what? I need to go lay down and stop thinking about this movie before I get a headache, so I'm gonna go ahead and end things there. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed what I had to say about the film, feel free to give this video a like and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. What did you think about Joker 2? I imagine this movie is gonna be highly controversial, so I really want to hear what everyone has to say and continue the conversation down below. And if you want to see another video like this, you can click right over here. If you don't do it, I'm gonna become the Joker, so please subscribe before I start dancing in my underwear like the Joker does. It seems like such a sad and pointless existence.